At my daughter's funeral, her husband threw coffee in my face and shouted, "She died of resentment because of you, you absent old man." Her 6-year-old daughter pointed at me and screamed, "Grandpa, Mommy wrote this note with your name before she died." Everyone cried when I read it. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I never thought I'd need permission to grieve my own daughter. Standing at the edge of Sacred Heart Cemetery, watching strangers file past Sarah's casket while I remained frozen 20 feet away, I felt like an intruder at my own child's funeral. The October wind cut through my black suit, but nothing could compare to the chill that had settled in my chest since receiving that devastating phone call 3 days ago. "Sarah's gone, Harold." Those were Michael's exact words. No explanation, no details, just a cold statement followed by funeral arrangements I wasn't consulted about. When I asked what happened, he simply said she couldn't handle the disappointment anymore and hung up. Now, watching him play the grieving widower, accepting condolences with practiced sorrow, I wondered how I'd become such a stranger to my own daughter's life. The last time I'd seen Sarah was 8 months ago, at a chance encounter in the grocery store. She looked thin, almost fragile, and when I tried to approach her, she turned away as if I were a ghost. "She doesn't want to see you," Michael had said that day, appearing beside her like a protective shadow. "You know how upset you make her." The memory burned as I stood there, watching my 6-year-old granddaughter Emma clutch Michael's hand. She kept glancing in my direction with curious eyes, and each time she did, Michael would gently redirect her attention elsewhere. I'd brought flowers, white roses, Sarah's favorites since she was 5 years old. At least they used to be her favorites. Maybe that had changed too, like everything else about the daughter I no longer knew. Taking a deep breath, I finally gathered the courage to approach the casket. Each step felt like walking through quicksand, heavy and uncertain. People parted as I moved forward, their whispered conversations dying as they recognized me. I caught fragments. "That's her father. Haven't seen him in years. Such a shame." When I reached the front row, I placed the roses beside the other arrangements. My hands trembled as I looked down at Sarah's peaceful face, trying to reconcile this still figure with the vibrant child who used to build blanket forts in our living room every Sunday. "What are you doing here?" Michael's voice cut through my grief like a blade. I turned to find him standing directly behind me, his face a mask of controlled fury. Several mourners had stopped their conversations to watch us. "She was my daughter," I said quietly, hoping to avoid a scene, was being the key word. His voice grew louder, drawing more attention. "You lost the right to call her that years ago. Michael, please, not here, not now." But he was beyond reasoning. His face flushed red as he stepped closer, and I could see something dangerous flickering in his eyes. "Do you have any idea what you put her through? The therapy sessions, the antidepressants, the nights she cried herself to sleep wondering why her own father abandoned her?" The mourners were openly staring now, forming a circle around us like spectators at an accident. I felt heat creeping up my neck, a mixture of shame and confusion. "I never abandoned. She died of a broken heart." Michael's shout echoed across the cemetery. "She died because she couldn't live with the pain of having a father who never cared." Before I could respond, he grabbed a cup of coffee from the nearby refreshment table, black, steaming hot, and threw it directly at my face. The scalding liquid hit my cheek and neck, sending shockwaves of pain through my body. Gasps erupted from the crowd as I staggered backward, coffee dripping from my chin onto my shirt. "She died of rancor because of you, you absent old man," Michael screamed, his voice breaking with what sounded like genuine anguish. "Every day she wondered why you stopped loving her. Every birthday, every holiday, she waited for you to remember she existed." I stood there, stunned and humiliated, hot coffee still burning my skin while dozens of people stared at me in horror. Some looked sympathetic, others disgusted. All I could think about was how wrong this felt, how the Michael I thought I knew would never have done something so cruel at his wife's funeral. That's when Emma broke free from her aunt's grip and ran toward me. Her little face was streaked with tears, and she clutched something in her small hand. "Grandpa, Harold," she called out, using a name I hadn't heard in over 2 years. Michael immediately moved to intercept her, but she was too quick. She reached me and thrust a folded piece of paper into my hands. "Mommy wrote this with your name before she died." Emma's voice carried across the silent cemetery. "She told me to give it to you if something happened to her." The paper felt fragile in my coffee-stained fingers, like it might disintegrate if I handled it too roughly. With shaking hands, I unfolded it, recognizing Sarah's handwriting immediately. The note was brief, written in pencil with hurried, desperate strokes. "Dad, I know now. Michael kept all your letters, threw away your gifts, changed his number so you couldn't call. I found them hidden in his office. All these years I thought you forgot about me, but you never stopped trying. I'm so sorry. I should have known you would never abandon me. Protect Emma. He's not who we thought he was. I'm scared of what he might do when he finds out I know. I love you. I always loved you. News. Sarah." The cemetery went completely silent except for the wind rustling through the oak trees. My vision blurred as I read the note again, each word hitting me like a physical blow. All those years of believing I'd failed as a father, of accepting that Sarah had grown to hate me, of respecting her apparent wish to have no contact, it had all been a lie. I looked up at Michael, who had gone pale as death. The mask of grief had slipped completely, replaced by something cold and calculating. Around us, mourners began to murmur, their whispered conversations growing louder as they processed what they'd just heard. "Where did she get this?" one woman asked. "Did he really hide letters from her father? Oh my God, that poor girl." Emma tugged at my sleeve, her voice small but clear in the growing chaos. "Mommy cried a lot after she found the box under Daddy's desk. She said she was going to call you, but then she got really sick really fast." Michael stepped forward, his jaw clenched tight. "Emma, honey, you don't understand what you're saying. Your mother was confused at the end. The medication made her—" "She wasn't confused," Emma interrupted, her voice growing stronger. "She showed me your picture and told me you loved her very much. She said Daddy lied about you." The murmurs grew into full conversations as people began connecting the pieces. I felt someone's hand on my shoulder, Sarah's old college friend Janet, whom I recognized from happier times. "Harold," she said softly, "we had no idea. If we'd known—" But I couldn't respond. I was staring at the note, at my daughter's final words to me, at the apology she never got to deliver in person. The coffee burns on my face felt insignificant compared to the pain in my chest, not just grief for Sarah's death, but rage at the years of deception that had stolen our relationship. As the crowd began to disperse, many shooting accusatory glances at Michael, I knelt down to Emma's level. Her blue eyes, so much like Sarah's, looked at me with a mixture of hope and confusion. "Will you take care of me now, Grandpa?" she whispered. "Mommy said you would protect me if anything happened to her." I wrapped my arms around her small frame, feeling her tiny heart beating against my chest. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm going to take care of you." Over Emma's shoulder, I saw Michael watching us with an expression I'd never seen before, pure, undisguised hatred. In that moment, I realized Sarah's note was more than just an apology. It was a warning, and something told me our nightmare was just beginning. Driving home from the cemetery with Emma sleeping in the back seat, my mind reeled with fragments of memories that suddenly made terrible sense. Every missed connection, every failed attempt at reconciliation, every time Sarah had seemed to pull away just as we were getting close, it all had Michael's fingerprints on it. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a moment, watching Emma's peaceful face in the rearview mirror. She looked so much like Sarah at that age, with the same stubborn chin and long eyelashes. How had I let so many years slip away without knowing my own granddaughter? The answer was in my jacket pocket, folded and refolded so many times the creases had worn soft. Sarah's note, her final attempt to bridge the gap that Michael had systematically carved between us. Once I'd gotten Emma settled on my couch with a cup of hot chocolate, I retreated to my study and opened the desk drawer I hadn't touched in months. Inside were dozens of unopened envelopes, returned birthday cards, Christmas gifts sent back with "Return to sender" scrawled across them in handwriting I now realized wasn't Sarah's. The first one was from 4 years ago, a birthday card for Sarah's 31st birthday. I remembered buying it specifically because it had sunflowers on the front, her favorite flower since childhood. The envelope bore a red stamp, addressee unknown, but Sarah had been living at the same address for years. I ripped it open now, my hands trembling with anger. The card was cheerful, innocent. Inside I'd written, "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I miss our Sunday morning pancake breakfasts. Call me when you're ready. Love always, Dad." Beneath it was another returned card, this one from Emma's 4th birthday. I'd bought her a stuffed elephant because Sarah had mentioned in one of our last conversations that Emma loved animals. The card was addressed correctly, but again marked addressee unknown. Boom, one by one I opened every returned envelope. Birthday cards, Christmas presents, thinking of you notes. Even a sympathy card I'd sent when Sarah's cat died. Information I'd only learned about through her old neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who still spoke to me at the grocery store. Each card contained messages of love, attempts to reconnect, invitations to lunch or dinner. None of them harsh or demanding, just a father's quiet persistence in trying to maintain a relationship with his daughter. All of them had been intercepted, marked as undeliverable, and sent back to me. "Grandpa Harold!" Emma's small voice startled me out of my dark thoughts. She stood in the doorway of my study, looking small and lost in her black funeral dress. "What is it, sweetheart? I'm thirsty, and I miss Mommy." I closed the drawer quickly and went to her, kneeling down to her level. "I miss her too. How about we get you some juice?" As I poured apple juice into a small glass, Emma climbed onto one of my kitchen stools and swung her legs back and forth. The normalcy of the moment felt surreal after everything that had happened. "Grandpa, why didn't you come see me and Mommy for so long?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that you've been systematically erased from their life? "I tried to, Emma. I tried many times. But your daddy told me that your Mommy didn't want to see me." Emma frowned, her small forehead wrinkling in concentration. "But Mommy always talked about you. She had pictures of you in her secret box." "Secret box?" "Uh-huh. In her closet, behind the shoes. She would take it out when Daddy wasn't home and show me pictures of when she was little. You were in lots of them." A painful realization began to dawn on me. What else was in the secret box? Letters, lots and lots of letters, and some presents that were still wrapped up. Emma took a sip of her juice. "Mommy cried when she looked at them. She said, 'They were from you.' But Daddy told her you didn't care about her anymore." I had to grip the edge of the counter to steady myself. All those gifts that had been returned, all those letters marked addressee unknown, they had never been returned at all. Michael had been intercepting them, telling Sarah I'd stopped sending them, while simultaneously sending them back to me to make me believe she didn't want contact. "Emma, do you remember when your Mommy found the box under Daddy's desk?" Her face lit up with a memory. "Oh yes, that was just before she got sick. She was looking for her medicine because her head hurt really bad, and Daddy wasn't home. She found a big box with papers and cards and presents. She started crying and laughing at the same time." "Do you know what happened to that box?" Emma's expression grew serious. "Mommy took some things from it and hid them in her secret place. Then she put the box back and told me never to tell Daddy that we found it. She said it was going to be our secret until she could fix everything." But Sarah had run out of time to fix anything. The thought made my chest tighten with grief and rage. I started to piece together the timeline in my mind. 3 years ago, after yet another failed attempt to contact Sarah, I'd called Michael directly. He'd been polite but firm, explaining that Sarah was going through a difficult time and that my presence in her life was triggering painful memories from her childhood. "I understand you mean well, Harold," he'd said in that smooth, reasonable voice I'd grown to trust. "But Sarah's therapist thinks it's best if she has some space to work through her feelings about your relationship. Maybe in time, when she's stronger." I'd respected that boundary, believing that my daughter needed healing I couldn't provide. I'd continued sending cards and gifts, hoping that eventually she'd be ready to reconnect. When they kept being returned, I'd assumed Sarah was making her feelings clear, but she hadn't been. She'd been trapped in a web of lies, believing her father had abandoned her just as much as I believed she'd rejected me. "Grandpa, are you sad?" Emma's voice brought me back to the present. I realized I'd been gripping my juice glass so tightly my knuckles had turned white. Yes, sweetheart, I'm very sad, but I'm also angry. At Daddy. The simple question hung in the air between us. How much did Emma understand about what had happened? How much had she seen or heard? Emma, did Daddy ever say mean things about me to you or Mommy? She nodded solemnly. He said you didn't love us anymore because we weren't good enough. He said you had a new family that was better than us. The lies were breathtaking in their cruelty. I'd been single since Sarah's mother died when Sarah was 12. I'd never remarried, never even seriously dated anyone. My entire world had revolved around my daughter until Michael systematically edited me out of it. That's not true, Emma. I never stopped loving you or your mommy. I don't have another family. You and your mommy were my whole world. I know, Emma said matter-of-factly. Mommy figured that out too. That's why she was going to call you. What stopped her? Emma's face grew solemn. She got really sick really fast. One day she was happy because she found the box, and the next day she couldn't get out of bed. Daddy said it was because she was sad, but she told me it felt different. Like when I had the flu, but worse. A chill ran down my spine. Sarah had been perfectly healthy the last time I'd seen her, despite looking thin. What kind of illness came on so suddenly and proved fatal so quickly? As if reading my thoughts, Emma added, Daddy gave her lots of medicine, different pills every day. He said they would make her feel better, but they just made her sleepier. I forced myself to keep my voice calm. Did your mommy see a doctor? Daddy said he would take her, but she was too sick to leave the house. He said he talked to the doctor on the phone and got the right medicine for her. Everything Emma was telling me painted a picture that made my stomach churn. Michael, who worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative, would have access to medications. He would know how to make someone appear ill, how to control their treatment, how to isolate them from outside help. Emma, I need you to think very carefully. In the days before your mommy died, did she try to use the phone or ask anyone for help? Emma nodded. She tried to call you? I saw her with the phone book looking for your number, but Daddy came home and took the phone away. He said she was too sick to make important calls. The full scope of Michael's manipulation was becoming clear. He hadn't just hidden my attempts to contact Sarah, he'd actively prevented her from reaching out to me when she finally understood what was happening. As Emma finished her juice, I made a decision that would change both our lives. I wasn't going to let Michael's lies destroy what was left of my family. But first, I needed to understand exactly what Sarah had discovered in that box and why it had led to her sudden illness. Looking at Emma's trusting face, I realized that my granddaughter might be the key to uncovering the truth about my daughter's death. But I also understood that if Michael was capable of the deception I suspected, Emma might not be safe with him. The funeral had been just the beginning. The real battle for my family was about to start. The next morning, I woke up to find Emma sitting at my kitchen table, carefully drawing with the crayons I'd found in an old box in my closet. She'd drawn a picture of 3 stick figures, herself, a woman who must be Sarah, and a taller man with a smile that looked more like a grimace. That's you, Grandpa, she said, pointing to a 4th figure she'd added in the corner, separated from the others by what looked like a wall made of black crayon strokes. The image broke my heart, but it also strengthened my resolve. I needed answers, and I needed them before Michael decided to reclaim Emma. The temporary custody arrangement the social worker had approved yesterday wouldn't last long if Michael contested it. Emma, sweetheart, I need to go out for a little while today. Would you like to visit Mrs. Patterson next door? She has a cat. Emma's face brightened. Mrs. Patterson had been my neighbor for 15 years and had often asked about Sarah and Emma. She'd be a safe place for Emma to stay while I did what needed to be done. An hour later, I stood outside the house where Sarah had lived for the last 5 years of her life. It was a modest 2-story home in a quiet subdivision, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's routines, the kind of place where someone might notice if something was wrong. I started with the house directly across the street. An elderly man answered the door, his suspicious expression softening when I explained who I was. You're Sarah's father? I wondered when you'd show up. I'm Robert Chen. He stepped onto his porch, glancing toward Sarah's house. Terrible thing. What happened to that sweet girl? Mr. Chen, I know this might sound strange, but did you notice anything unusual about Sarah in the weeks before she died? His weathered face creased with concern. Matter of fact, I did. My wife and we've lived here 23 years. We know when something's not right. He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. Sarah used to wave every morning when she took Emma to school. Friendly girl, always had a smile. But the last month or so, we hardly saw her at all. Oh, what do you mean? Michael started taking Emma to school, said Sarah was under the weather. When we did catch glimpses of her, she looked, he struggled for the right words, fragile, like she was disappearing bit by bit. I felt a familiar chill. Did you ever see her outside? In the yard, maybe? That's just it. We didn't. Used to see her gardening all the time, tending those roses she loved. But toward the end, the only time we saw her was through the upstairs window. She'd stand there sometimes just looking out. My wife said it reminded her of a bird in a cage. Mr. Chen's wife appeared in the doorway, a small woman with kind eyes and graying hair. Robert, who are you talking to? When he introduced me, her expression grew pained. Oh, you poor man. We felt so bad for you at the funeral yesterday, the way that husband of hers treated you. Mrs. Chen, did you know Sarah well? Well enough to know something wasn't right those last few weeks. She came to our door one evening, maybe 3 weeks ago. Said she needed to use our phone because theirs wasn't working. Mrs. Chen glanced at her husband. She looked terrible, thin as a rail, shaky. Said she needed to call her father. My heart stopped. What happened? Robert let her use the phone, of course, but just as she was dialing, Michael showed up. He was apologetic, said Sarah was confused because of her medication, that she'd been having episodes. He guided her home, very gentle-like, but she shivered. There was something about the way he looked at us that made it clear we shouldn't interfere. Did she try to contact anyone else? Mr. Chen nodded grimly. A few days later, she flagged down the mailman. We saw her from our kitchen window, talking to him urgently, handing him something. But when Michael came home and found out, he had words with the postal service. Said his wife was having mental health issues and might try to send inappropriate letters. The picture was becoming clearer, and it was terrifying. Sarah had been systematically isolated, her attempts at outside contact blocked at every turn. But what had triggered her sudden awareness? What had she found in Michael's hidden box that made her realize the truth? I thanked the Chens and moved on to the next house. The pattern repeated itself with variations. The neighbor to the left mentioned seeing Michael burning papers in the backyard fire pit late one night, around the time Sarah got sick. The family to the right said their teenage daughter had been friends with Sarah and noticed she'd stopped responding to texts and social media completely. Mom was worried about her, the teenager, Ashley told me. Sarah used to comment on my posts all the time, like pictures of my art projects and stuff. Then suddenly, nothing. When I asked Mr. Michael about it, he said she was taking a break from social media for her mental health. But the most disturbing conversation came from Janet Morrison, the woman who lived 4 houses down. Janet was a nurse at the local hospital, and she'd known Sarah through their children's school activities. I've been debating whether to call someone about this, Janet admitted, inviting me into her living room. What I saw doesn't sit right with me, professionally speaking. What did you see? About 2 weeks before Sarah passed, I was coming home from a night shift and saw Michael loading something heavy into his car. It was around 3 in the morning, and he was being very quiet about it. When he saw me, he said Sarah had asked him to donate some old furniture, but he didn't want to wake the neighbors during normal hours. Janet paused, her nurse's instincts clearly troubled by the memory. The thing is, what I saw him loading didn't look like furniture. It looked like medical equipment, an IV stand, maybe some monitoring devices. And he was wearing gloves, the kind we use at the hospital. My blood ran cold. Medical equipment? I know it sounds crazy, but Michael's in pharmaceutical sales. He has access to all kinds of equipment for demonstrations and training. And as a nurse, I know what an IV setup looks like. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. Harold, there are ways to make someone very sick using medications, especially if you know what you're doing. Ways that might not show up in a standard autopsy if the coroner isn't looking for them specifically. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If Michael had been systematically poisoning Sarah, it would explain her rapid decline, her confusion, her inability to reach out for help effectively. It would also explain why he was so confident about controlling the narrative of her death. "Did you tell anyone about this?" Janet shook her head. "Who would I tell? Michael's well-respected in the community, and Sarah did have a history of depression after her mother died. Without proof, it would just sound like wild speculation, but it wasn't speculation anymore." Combined with everything Emma had told me and what the neighbors had observed, a pattern of deliberate isolation and potential poisoning was emerging. Sarah hadn't died of a broken heart or depression. She'd been murdered by the man she trusted most. As I drove home, my mind raced with the implications. If Michael had killed Sarah, Emma was in immediate danger. He couldn't risk her remembering details that might implicate him. And he certainly couldn't allow her to maintain a relationship with me now that I was asking questions. When I pulled into my driveway, Mrs. Patterson was waiting on her porch with Emma, both of them looking worried. "Harold," Mrs. Patterson called out as I approached. "Michael stopped by about an hour ago. He seemed very upset that Emma wasn't at home. Said there'd been a misunderstanding about the custody arrangement." Emma ran to me and grabbed my hand tightly. "Grandpa, I don't want to go back to Daddy's house. He was really mad when Mrs. Patterson said I was staying with you." I knelt down to her level, trying to keep my voice calm despite the fear coursing through me. "What did he say, sweetheart?" "He said I was being selfish, keeping you from your grief. He said you were too old to take care of me and that I belonged with him." Emma's voice grew smaller. "But I don't want to go back. The house feels scary without Mommy." Mrs. Patterson placed a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. "Harold, that man's demeanor was quite aggressive. He insisted on knowing exactly when you'd be back and seemed very interested in what Emma might have told you about her mother." The walls were closing in. Michael knew I was investigating, and he was preparing to remove the one witness who could potentially expose him. But Emma was more than just a witness. She was the last connection I had to Sarah, and I wasn't going to let him destroy that too. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, I sat in my study and made a list of everything I'd learned. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. The systematic isolation, the intercepted communications, the suspicious medical equipment, Sarah's sudden illness following her discovery of Michael's deception, and now his desperate attempt to regain control of Emma. I also made another decision. Tomorrow, I would take Emma to see Dr. Patricia Wells, Sarah's pediatrician. If Michael had been medicating Sarah inappropriately, he might have been doing the same to Emma. And if there were any unexplained medications in Emma's system, that could be the proof I needed to protect her permanently. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I paused outside Emma's room. She was sleeping peacefully, clutching a small stuffed elephant, one of the gifts I'd sent for her birthday that had supposedly been returned. Sarah must have retrieved it from Michael's hidden collection. Looking at my granddaughter's innocent face, I made a silent promise. Michael had stolen years of my relationship with Sarah through manipulation and lies. He might have even stolen Sarah's life itself, but he wasn't going to steal Emma's future. The investigation was just beginning, and I had no intention of stopping until I had the truth, no matter how dangerous that truth might be. Dr. Patricia Wells had been Emma's pediatrician since birth, and her expression grew increasingly troubled as I explained my concerns. Emma sat on the examination table, swinging her legs and coloring in a book, unaware of the gravity of our conversation. "I need to ask you some difficult questions, Harold," Dr. Wells said quietly. "Has Emma exhibited any unusual symptoms lately? Excessive sleepiness, nausea, confusion?" I looked at Emma, remembering her behavior over the past few days. "She has been sleeping more than usual, and yesterday she said her tummy hurt, even though she hadn't eaten anything unusual." Dr. Wells nodded grimly. "I'd like to run some blood tests, just to be safe. Emma, sweetheart, would you let me take a tiny bit of blood so we can make sure you're healthy?" While we waited for the results, Dr. Wells pulled Sarah's medical file from her cabinet. "Harold, I have to tell you something that's been bothering me since Sarah's death. About 6 months ago, Michael brought Emma in for what he called behavioral issues. He said she was having trouble sleeping and asked about mild sedatives. My heart sank. Did you prescribe anything? I refused. Emma was perfectly normal, active, happy, well-adjusted. I told Michael that behavioral issues in children Emma's age were usually environmental, not medical. He seemed frustrated by my response. He flipped through the file. But here's what concerns me. He asked very specific questions about dosages and drug interactions. Questions that seemed beyond normal parental concern. 20 minutes later, Dr. Wells returned with Emma's blood test results, her face pale. "Harold, we need to talk privately." After settling Emma in the waiting room with a nurse and some toys, Dr. Wells led me to her office and closed the door. Emma has traces of diphenhydramine and lorazepam in her system. Both are sedatives, and neither should be in a 6-year-old's bloodstream without a prescription and medical supervision. I felt the room spin around me. How much? Not enough to be immediately dangerous, but enough to cause drowsiness and compliance. "Harold, someone has been medicating this child without medical authorization." Her voice was tight with controlled anger. "Based on the levels, I'd estimate she's been receiving small, regular doses for at least several days, possibly weeks." The implications crashed over me like a wave. Michael hadn't just been isolating and potentially poisoning Sarah, he'd been drugging Emma too, probably to keep her quiet and manageable during Sarah's final days. "Dr. Wells, I need to ask you something else. Did you ever treat Sarah in the weeks before she died?" She shook her head. "That's another thing that bothered me. Sarah was always diligent about medical care, both for herself and Emma, but in the last month of her life I never saw her. When I called to check on her after hearing she was ill, Michael said she was seeing a specialist and didn't need her regular physician anymore." "What kind of specialist?" He was vague, said it was a psychiatrist who was handling both her mental health and physical symptoms. "But Harold, I've been practicing medicine for 25 years. Physical symptoms that severe should have warranted emergency intervention, not just psychiatric care." Dr. Wells pulled out a business card and handed it to me. "I'm mandated to report suspected child abuse, and medicating a child without medical authorization qualifies. I'm also going to recommend that Emma stay with you while Child Protective Services investigates." As we returned to the waiting room, I found Emma fast asleep in the chair, the coloring book fallen from her lap. Dr. Wells checked her pulse and breathing, then looked at me with concern. "This level of sedation isn't normal for a child her age, especially not at 2 in the afternoon. Harold, I think you need to consider that Michael may have been medicating Emma to prevent her from talking about what she witnessed in her mother's final days." The drive home was a blur of rage and determination. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror at Emma, who slept soundly in her car seat, and wondering what horrors she might have seen that Michael felt compelled to keep her quiet about. When we arrived home, I carried Emma upstairs and tucked her into the spare bedroom. As I was adjusting her blanket, she stirred and looked up at me with drowsy eyes. "Grandpa, I had a bad dream about Mommy." I sat on the edge of the bed. "What kind of dream, sweetheart?" "Mommy was calling for help, but I couldn't move my legs to go to her. I felt all heavy and sleepy, just like I do now." Emma's voice was small and confused. "Daddy gave me medicine and said it would help me sleep through Mommy's bad nights, but I wanted to help her." The pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. Michael had been sedating Emma to prevent her from witnessing or interfering with whatever he was doing to Sarah. A 6-year-old's testimony might be dismissed, but a child who tried to help her dying mother could create complications for his plan. "Emma, do you remember what the medicine looked like?" "Little white pills. Daddy put them in my juice and said they were vitamins to help me grow big and strong." She yawned. "But they just made me sleepy all the time." After Emma fell back asleep, I went downstairs and called the number Dr. Wells had given me for Child Protective Services. The caseworker, Maria Santos, agreed to meet with me that evening after I explained the medical findings. While I waited for her arrival, I decided to take a risk. I drove back to Sarah's neighborhood, this time heading directly to her house. Michael's car wasn't in the driveway, and I remembered him mentioning at the funeral that he'd be handling work obligations that week. Using the spare key I knew Sarah kept under the decorative frog by the front steps, a hiding place that dated back to her childhood, I let myself into the house. It felt strange being in my daughter's home without permission, but Emma's safety and the truth about Sarah's death were more important than respecting boundaries. The house was eerily quiet and looked like a museum of normal family life. Photos of Sarah, Michael, and Emma lined the hallway, but I noticed something odd. In every recent photo, Sarah looked increasingly thin and distant, while Michael's smile seemed to grow more possessive. I headed upstairs to Sarah's bedroom, looking for the secret box Emma had mentioned. Her closet was meticulously organized, but behind a row of shoes, I found a small wooden box that had belonged to Sarah's mother. Inside were treasures that broke my heart. Birthday cards I'd sent that were marked undeliverable, Christmas gifts still in their original wrapping, and dozens of letters I'd written over the years. But there was something else, a small notebook filled with Sarah's handwriting. The entries were dated, starting about a month before her death. March 15th, found Dad's letters and gifts hidden in Michael's office. All these years I thought he'd forgotten about me. How could Michael lie like this? I need to call Dad, but Michael changed our phone number again without telling me. March 18th, tried to call Dad from the neighbor's phone, but Michael found out. He says I'm being emotional and not thinking clearly. Maybe he's right. I feel so confused lately. March 22nd, something's wrong with me. I'm dizzy all the time, can barely keep food down. Michael says it's stress from discovering the letters, but this feels different, physical. I asked to see Dr. Wells, but Michael says she's not available. March 25th, Michael's been giving me pills for the nausea, but they make me feel worse, foggy. I can't think straight. Emma's acting strange too, sleeping all the time. Need to get help, but don't know how. March 28th, found IV equipment in the basement. Michael says it's for work demonstrations, but why would he need it at home? I'm scared. If something happens to me, I need Dad to know the truth about Michael. Need to protect Emma. The final entry was barely legible, the handwriting shaky. March 30th, can barely hold pen. Michael thinks I don't know, but I saw him adding something to my water glass. Emma's medicine too. He's making us sick. Going to hide this notebook and the letter for Dad. If I don't make it, someone needs to know. I sat on Sarah's bed, clutching the notebook, tears streaming down my face. My daughter had figured out what Michael was doing, but by then it was too late. He'd already been poisoning her, making her too weak and confused to escape or call for help effectively. A sound from downstairs made me freeze. The front door was opening. Sarah? Emma? I'm home early. Michael's voice carried up the stairs. My heart pounded as I quickly put everything back in the box and shoved it behind the shoes. I could hear Michael moving around downstairs, probably looking for Emma. Any moment he'd come upstairs and find me in his dead wife's bedroom. I slipped out of the bedroom and down the hall toward the back stairs, hoping to escape through the kitchen door. But as I reached the top of the stairs, I heard Michael's footsteps on the main staircase. Emma? Are you hiding up there, sweetheart? Daddy's home. His voice had a sing-song quality that made my skin crawl. This was the voice Emma had been hearing while her mother was dying, the voice that told her the medicine was vitamins, the voice that convinced a 6-year-old to keep deadly secrets. I made it to the kitchen and was reaching for the back door when I heard Michael upstairs, moving from room to room. In moments, he'd discover that someone had been in the house. As I slipped out the back door and around to the front of the house, I saw Michael appear in the upstairs window of Sarah's bedroom. He was holding something, the wooden box I'd just been examining. Our eyes met through the glass, and his expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something far more dangerous. He knew I'd found Sarah's notebook. He knew I understood what he'd done. And from the cold calculation in his eyes, I realized that Emma and I had just become his next targets. I drove home faster than I should have, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I arrived, Mrs. Patterson was waiting on my porch again, this time looking genuinely frightened. Harold, thank goodness you're back. Michael was here again, very agitated. He demanded to know where you'd taken Emma and said there would be consequences if you didn't return her immediately. He grabbed my arm. Harold, I've never seen anyone look so angry. I think you and Emma might be in real danger. Looking up at the bedroom window where Emma was sleeping, drugged with sedatives that could have killed her, I realized Mrs. Patterson was right. Michael had murdered my daughter and nearly killed my granddaughter. And now that his secret was out, he had nothing left to lose. The final confrontation was coming, and I needed to be ready for it. The call came at 11:30 that night, jolting me from an uneasy sleep. I'd been dozing in the chair beside Emma's bed, unwilling to leave her alone even in my own house. The caller ID showed Michael's number. Harold. His voice was calm, controlled, but underneath I could hear something dangerous. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Oh, I think you do. Especially since you decided to break into my home today. There was a pause, and when he continued, his tone had shifted to something almost conversational. You found Sarah's little notebook, didn't you? Her paranoid ramblings about vitamins and medicine. My grip tightened on the phone. They weren't paranoid ramblings. They were the observations of a woman who realized her husband was poisoning her. Michael laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. Poisoning? Harold, you're as delusional as she was toward the end. Sarah was sick, mentally sick, depression, anxiety, paranoid delusions. It runs in families, you know. Her mother had the same problems. Sarah's mother died in a car accident. Did she? Or did she drive into that tree because she couldn't handle the voices in her head anymore? Michael's voice took on a mocking tone. Sarah was heading down the same path. The medications I gave her were to help her to keep her calm while we worked through her issues. By medicating her against her will, by drugging Emma. Emma needed to sleep through her mother's episodes. Would you rather she witnessed Sarah's complete mental breakdown? I was protecting that child from trauma that would have scarred her for life. I stood up, pacing to the window, while keeping one eye on Emma's sleeping form. You murdered my daughter. I tried to save her, but some people can't be saved, Harold. Some people are too broken. His voice hardened. Just like some old men are too stubborn to mind their own business. The threat was clear, but I pressed on. Emma's blood tests show sedatives, Michael. Dr. Wells has already reported it to Child Protective Services. Your game is over. Silence stretched between us, and when Michael spoke again, his mask had finally slipped completely. You have no idea what you've done. Emma is my daughter, not yours. And I won't let you poison her mind against me the way you're trying to poison everyone else's. Emma stays with me. We'll see about that. The line went dead. I immediately called Maria Santos, the CPS caseworker, but it went to voicemail. I left a message explaining Michael's threatening call, then called the police non-emergency line. The officer who answered was polite but unhelpful. No specific threats had been made, and custody disputes were civil matters, unless there was immediate danger. The next morning brought a knock at my door that I'd been dreading. Michael stood on my porch with a woman in a business suit and a police officer, all of them looking official and serious. Mr. Patterson, the officer said, consulting his clipboard. I'm Officer Rodriguez. This is Ms. Jennifer Walsh from Family Court Services. Mr. Carmichael has filed an emergency petition for custody of his daughter. The woman stepped forward, her expression professional but not unkind. Mr. Patterson, I understand you've been caring for Emma since her mother's funeral, but Mr. Carmichael is her legal guardian. Unless there's been a formal custody order, there are concerns about Emma's safety, I interrupted. Dr. Wells found sedatives in her bloodstream. Someone has been medicating her without medical supervision. Michael's expression was perfectly composed, the picture of a concerned father. I've been giving Emma children's Benadryl to help her sleep through this difficult time. She's been having nightmares since her mother's death. Any father would do the same. Benadryl and lorazepam are not the same thing, I said, but Ms. Walsh was already looking uncomfortable with the situation. Mr. Patterson, these are serious allegations, but they need to be investigated through proper channels. Until then, Emma needs to be with her legal guardian. I looked at Emma, who had appeared in the hallway behind me. She was holding her stuffed elephant, looking small and confused by all the adult voices and official faces. "Daddy?" she said hesitantly, and I saw Michael's expression soften into something that might have looked like genuine love to someone who didn't know better. "Come here, sweetheart," Michael said, kneeling down with his arms outstretched. "Daddy's here to take you home." But Emma didn't move toward him. Instead, she stepped closer to me, wrapping her small arms around my leg. "I want to stay with Grandpa Harold." Michael's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Emma, you're confused. Grandpa Harold is sad about Mommy, and that's making him say things that aren't true. You belong at home with Daddy." "I don't want to go home," Emma said, her voice growing smaller. "The house makes me scared without Mommy." Ms. Walsh looked between us, clearly uncomfortable with forcing a child who was obviously distressed. "Perhaps we could arrange a transitional period." "No." Michael stood up, his mask slipping just enough for me to see the cold calculation underneath. "Emma comes home today. This man has been filling her head with lies about her own father. The longer she stays here, the more damage he does." Officer Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. "Sir?" "The child seems upset." "She's 6 years old and her mother just died," Michael snapped, then caught himself and softened his tone. "Of course she's upset, but letting her hide from reality isn't helping anyone." Emma tightened her grip on my leg, and I felt her trembling. Looking down at her frightened face, I made a decision that could have landed me in jail. "I'm not letting her go with him," I said quietly but firmly. "Not until a proper investigation is completed." Officer Rodriguez's hand moved to his radio. "Sir, I don't want to have to arrest you for interfering with a custody order." "Then don't." I knelt down to Emma's level, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "Emma, tell everyone what Daddy used to give you that made you sleepy." Emma looked up at the adults surrounding her, her 6-year-old mind trying to process the tension and fear in the air. "Daddy gave me medicine in my juice. He said it was vitamins, but it made me too sleepy to help Mommy when she was sick." Michael's face went pale. "She's confused. Children make up stories when they're traumatized." "What did the medicine look like, Emma?" I continued. "Little white pills. Daddy crushed them up in my orange juice every morning." Emma's voice was getting stronger, as if finally having adults listen to her was giving her courage. "He gave Mommy different pills, but they made her sick instead of better." Ms. Walsh was now looking at Michael with obvious suspicion. "Mr. Carmichael, these are very specific allegations." "From a traumatized 6-year-old who's been coached by a bitter old man," Michael interrupted, but his composure was cracking. "Harold has been trying to turn Emma against me since the funeral. This is exactly why she needs to come home." "No." Emma's shout surprised everyone. "I don't want to go home. Daddy scared Mommy. He made her cry." The silence that followed was deafening. Officer Rodriguez was speaking quietly into his radio, and Ms. Walsh was taking notes with a troubled expression. Michael tried one more time to regain control. "Emma, sweetie, you're remembering things wrong. Mommy was sick, and Daddy was trying to help her feel better. You know Daddy loves you, right?" Emma looked up at him with the kind of clarity that sometimes comes from children who've seen too much. "You loved Mommy too, but you still hurt her." That simple statement, delivered with a 6-year-old's honest confusion about how someone could claim to love while causing harm, was like a bomb going off in the middle of Michael's carefully constructed facade. Officer Rodriguez finished his radio conversation and approached Michael. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come to the station with me. There are some questions that need to be answered about these allegations." "This is ridiculous," Michael protested, but I could see panic starting to creep into his eyes. "You're going to believe the fantasies of a child over the word of a grieving father?" "I'm going to let the detectives sort this out," Officer Rodriguez replied firmly. "Ms. Walsh, what's the protocol here?" Ms. Walsh was still taking notes, her expression grave. "Given the specific nature of the child's statements and the medical evidence Mr. Patterson mentioned, I think Emma should remain in her current placement pending investigation. Mr. Carmichael, you'll need to speak with family court about scheduling supervised visitation." Michael's mask finally fell away completely. The charming, grieving widower disappeared, replaced by something cold and desperate. "You're all making a huge mistake. Emma belongs with me. I'm her father." "And Harold was Sarah's father," Ms. Walsh replied quietly. "But according to Emma, you kept them apart for years. That's going to be part of our investigation too." As Officer Rodriguez escorted Michael to the patrol car, Michael turned back toward the house. The look he gave me was pure hatred, and I knew this wasn't over. Men like Michael didn't give up easily, especially when their carefully constructed lives were falling apart. Emma pressed closer to me as we watched the police car drive away. "Grandpa Harold, is Daddy going to jail?" "I don't know, sweetheart, but you're safe now. I promise you're safe." But even as I said the words, I wondered if I could keep that promise. Michael was smart, manipulative, and desperate. He'd already killed once to protect his secrets. What would he do when he realized those secrets were about to be exposed completely? As I closed the door and gathered Emma into my arms, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was just beginning. 3 months later, I stood in family court holding Emma's hand as the judge delivered the final custody ruling. The investigation had been thorough and devastating for Michael's carefully constructed image. The autopsy they performed on Sarah after exhuming her body told a story of systematic poisoning, traces of multiple medications that, when combined, had caused organ failure disguised as natural illness. Michael's access to pharmaceutical samples through his job had given him the perfect murder weapon. Emma's testimony, given with the help of a child psychologist, had been heartbreaking but crucial. She described months of being given vitamins that made her sleepy, of watching her mother grow weaker while being told it was sadness, of being unable to help because she was too drowsy to move. "Mr. Carmichael," Judge Henderson said, looking at Michael with barely concealed disgust, "you are hereby stripped of all parental rights. Additionally, you will face criminal charges for the murder of Sarah Carmichael and child endangerment." Michael sat rigidly in his chair, flanked by his lawyers. The charming mask he'd worn for years was gone, replaced by the cold calculation I'd glimpsed that night at the hospital. When his eyes met mine across the courtroom, I saw no remorse, only fury at being caught. "Mr. Patterson," the judge continued, turning to me with a much warmer expression, "full custody of Emma Carmichael is awarded to you, with the understanding that you'll provide her with the love and stability she needs to heal from this trauma." Emma squeezed my hand tighter, and I squeezed back. We'd both been healing over these past months, learning to trust again, learning to be a family in the way that Sarah and I never got the chance to be. As we left the courthouse, Emma tugged at my sleeve. "Grandpa Harold, does this mean I get to keep living with you forever?" "As long as you want to, sweetheart," she smiled. The first truly carefree smile I'd seen from her since that terrible day at the cemetery. "Good, because I like making pancakes with you on Sunday mornings." Sunday morning pancakes. It was a tradition Sarah and I had shared when she was Emma's age, before life got complicated, before Michael entered our lives and systematically destroyed our relationship. Now Emma and I were building our own version of that tradition, one that no one could take away from us. The drive home took us past the cemetery where Sarah was buried. I'd been visiting her grave every week, sometimes with Emma, sometimes alone. Today felt different, though. Today felt like closure. "Can we stop and see Mommy?" Emma asked, as if reading my thoughts. We parked and walked hand in hand to Sarah's headstone. Someone had left fresh flowers, probably Janet, Sarah's old friend, who'd become a regular visitor once the truth came out. The inscription read simply, "Sarah Elizabeth Patterson Carmichael, beloved daughter and mother, finally at peace." I'd chosen that inscription carefully. Sarah had never been a Carmichael in her heart. Michael had stolen that identity from her along with everything else. But she would always be a Patterson, and now she was finally at peace. Emma knelt beside the grave and placed a drawing she'd made at school, a picture of 3 people holding hands under a rainbow. "Mommy, this is me and Grandpa Harold and you. We're together now, even though you're in heaven." As we stood there in the afternoon sunshine, I thought about the note Sarah had written, the one that had started this whole journey toward truth. She'd asked me to protect Emma, and I had. But in protecting Emma, I'd also found a way to honor Sarah's memory and reclaim the relationship that Michael had stolen from us. Emma was thriving now. The sedatives had cleared from her system within days of leaving Michael's house, and her natural personality had emerged, curious, affectionate, remarkably resilient. She was seeing a therapist to help process what she'd witnessed, but children are more adaptable than adults sometimes. She was learning to trust again, to sleep without fear, to be a normal 6-year-old. Dr. Wells had become a regular part of our lives, monitoring Emma's health and serving as something of a guardian angel. She'd been the one to push for the exhumation of Sarah's body when the police initially showed reluctance. Her medical expertise had been crucial in proving that Sarah's death wasn't natural. The thing about men like Michael, Dr. Wells had told me during one of our conversations, is that they're so arrogant, they believe they can fool everyone forever. He never expected anyone to question the grieving widower narrative, especially not the father he'd so successfully demonized. But Michael had made mistakes. The medical equipment Janet had seen him disposing of, the detailed questions he'd asked about drug interactions, the systematic isolation of Sarah that multiple neighbors had witnessed. Most importantly, he'd underestimated a 6-year-old's memory and a grandfather's determination to find the truth. The criminal trial was still months away, but Michael's lawyers were already hinting at a plea bargain. Life in prison instead of the death penalty. Part of me wanted him to face the ultimate punishment for what he'd done to Sarah, but mostly I just wanted him gone from our lives forever. That evening, as Emma and I sat in our living room working on a jigsaw puzzle, one of the many quiet activities we discovered together, she looked up at me with Sarah's blue eyes. "Grandpa Harold, do you think Mommy knows that we figured out the truth?" I considered my answer carefully. Emma was dealing with concepts too complex for any child to fully understand, but she deserved honesty appropriate to her age. "I think your mommy is proud of how brave you were to tell the truth, even when it was scary, and I think she's happy that we found each other." Emma nodded solemnly, then returned to searching for puzzle pieces. After a few minutes, she spoke again. "I'm glad Daddy can't hurt anyone else now." The simple statement broke my heart and filled it with pride simultaneously. This little girl had survived something unthinkable and come through it with her capacity for love and trust intact. She would carry scars, but she would also carry strength. Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed, I sat in my study looking through the photo albums I'd been creating, new memories to replace the stolen years. Pictures of Emma's first day at her new school, where she was thriving without the constant sedation that had dulled her natural intelligence. Photos from our weekend trips to the park, the zoo, the children's museum. Images of ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because we'd almost lost the chance to have them. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I'd been meaning to call for weeks. When Janet answered, I could hear the smile in her voice. "Harold, how did the custody hearing go?" "We won. Emma's officially mine now." "Thank God. That little girl has been through enough." Janet paused. "Harold, I hope you know how proud Sarah would be of you, the way you fought for the truth for Emma. It's exactly what Sarah would have wanted." After we hung up, I walked upstairs to check on Emma one last time before bed. She was sleeping peacefully, her stuffed elephant tucked under one arm, and a new teddy bear, one I'd given her just last week, under the other. Her face was relaxed, free from the fear and confusion that had marked her features for so long. Looking at her, I made a silent promise to Sarah. I would give Emma the childhood that had been stolen from her. I would tell her stories about her mother's real personality, not the broken woman Michael had created through isolation and drugs. I would make sure she knew how much Sarah had loved her, how hard Sarah had tried to protect her, even when she was dying. And I would never let anyone make Emma feel unwanted or unloved again. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be therapy sessions, difficult questions, moments when the trauma surfaced unexpectedly. But we would face it together, the way families are supposed to. As I turned off the lights and headed to my own room, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace. The truth had been painful, devastating, earth-shattering, but it had also been liberating. Michael had stolen years from Sarah and me through manipulation and lies. He'd murdered my daughter and nearly destroyed my granddaughter. But in the end, his evil had brought Emma and me together in a way that might never have happened otherwise. Sarah's final note had asked me to protect Emma, and I had. But Emma had also saved me from a lifetime of believing I'd failed as a father, from the crushing guilt of thinking my daughter had died hating me, from the loneliness of believing I had no family left. Some bonds, I realized, are stronger than lies, stronger than manipulation, stronger even than death. Sarah was gone, but her love lived on in Emma. And together, Emma and I were building something beautiful from the ashes of Michael's destruction, a real family based on truth and love instead of control and deception. It wasn't the ending I would have chosen. I would have preferred to have Sarah back, to undo the years of separation, to have the chance to be the father and grandfather I'd always wanted to be while she was still alive. But it was the ending we'd been given, and we were going to make the most of it. Every Sunday morning pancake breakfast, every bedtime story, every homework session and playground visit was a victory over the darkness Michael had tried to create. Emma was safe. The truth was known. Justice was being served. And for the first time in years, I could sleep peacefully knowing that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to love and be loved by the granddaughter who had saved my life simply by telling the truth. Sarah's last gift to me hadn't been that note, devastating as it was. Her last gift had been Emma, brave, honest, resilient Emma, who would carry the best parts of her mother forward into a future filled with love instead of fear. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.